but I think there's a lot of guilt for parents on that social pressure, of what it's supposed to look like, what joys and gifts we're supposed to give them with these wonderful memories. And, they look different for everybody, no matter whether it's the circumstances of the household or the circumstances of your child's diagnosis or that of their siblings. So I think the first thing I would say is to give yourself some grace. We always try to encourage parents that, and not feel guilty. What your world looks like, that's what it looks like.
I know, Tracy, you've been talking about your fun summer that's maybe a little bit more dramatic than you might have enjoyed.
I think that it's the word bored that I hear probably 50 times a day. That is so hard. For me, summertime has always been a little difficult. When Melissa and I were talking, about going to the library because they have the books and it's going to be a great, little adventure that we can go on, having that expectation of a mom and having, the set plans to do these things, and you're trying to do them so that you get them involved in different things. And our expectations, I think that we also have to remind ourselves as parents, that might not always happen. What our plan is sometimes isn't what we get, because sometimes our children do struggle. I remember trying to go to the library, and I was like, this is going to be great, and we're going to go pick out some books or even movies. And then the meltdown comes. And we're like, okay, well, we're going to go back home. So, sometimes, as parents, we're trying everything that we can to try to make those memories and try to, get them involved to do things. And sometimes it doesn't work out sometimes.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the personalities of the children. Like, I have 2 little boys that are just little now. And, my teenagers are their own, worst enemies. But my 6 and my 8-year-old, I have one that he would run all day, every day. He loves to go places. He loves adventures, and he's not going to like the library, but he's going to love to go somewhere. My 8-year-old doesn't want to go anywhere. He's a homebody. He wants to be home. This is his downtime, his safe place. He just doesn't want to go. My mother-in-law came this morning to pick them up, to take them swimming for the day and go fishing. And my 6-year-old literally come out with rubber boots on and a fishing hat, and he was ready. And my 8-year-old was like, I don't really want to go. And they haven't been anywhere since we got back from vacation, and they love their grandma, but he just doesn't like to leave the house. So it's a struggle to get him to go. Once he usually gets there, he's okay, but it's the struggle. And so then it's the meltdown in the car. It's the meltdown dragging him to the car. And he'll enjoy it once he does it, but it's the build up.
Right.
So then by the time you get to the car, you're sweating, you're cranky, you don't want to go anymore. You're like, let's just go back in the house. And it's just a lot. And like I said, and I know we have all these expectations, but then you got to think about it, like the way he processes it, he would just rather be home. He's a homebody, and so, but then my 6-year-old, like, he's packed and ready. Like, I don't know where he thought he was going. He's ready to go. He wants to go anywhere. So I think we have a lot of expectations, but then I always have to stop and think, because Riker really has issues going into new situations.
Yeah.
I think too, something that you said about the expectations, I think something also that I was kind of relating to is summertime and plans. When we say we're going to do something, or we go, on Thursday we're going to go to the beach, or, and say that out loud, that could be the plan. And then something falls through, and that Thursday date doesn't happen. For me, I think I've learned for many years that I can't even tell my daughter what the plan could be for the chance of that plan maybe changing, because then she'll be like, why did you even tell me? You know, I got my heart set up and I was looking forward to something, and now I'm not going to get to do it. And I'm like, well, things happen, you know, I'm sorry, but that expectation that they look forward to also can be really hard for them to be, you know, have that feeling of being let down.
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, I wanted to get together and talk about this because I know just the fact that I mean, I think we in some ways have kind of this dream job because when we're having a challenge with our kids, we just have a built-in audience that we could, you know, slack anybody on the team and be like, all right, are you melting down? Because I need a break. Which I think is really nice. Definitely an unusual situation. But I was reading, Peyton had put together an article about that bridging the gap between the summer and back to school. And it, as she and I were talking, it really kind of made me think that, you know, as parents, we kind of complain about, oh, why can't our kids be bored? You know, why can't our kids amuse themselves and stuff? But the world has evolved that it's such a different place now than it was a couple decades ago, maybe when some of us were children, right? And our children have probably been in situations where they're raised like I know in childcare centers, again, my daughter being a teacher and teaching in pre-K and preschool, they have to set up their classroom so there's no like barriers that they can see every child in the classroom. So there's not even like a little bit of privacy if the kids were sitting on the other side of the bookshelf. So our children are used to having adults with eyes on them 24/7, where they can't even walk to the bathroom without an escort. So then they go to school and they're under that watchful eye always of teachers, and we keep them very structured. They're not really allowed to pick and choose what to do next or when to do things or often even how to do it. So we don't have any time for kids to be bored. You know, maybe even in a previous lifetime, like when we were kiddos and you got done with your work early, maybe it was like, okay, pick a book to read or pick an activity to do. And now they have kids so structured that they move from activity to activity and even overstructured. And then think about how we have our lives structured even after school. You know, we pick the kids up after school, or maybe they stay late for an activity, but maybe we pick them up after school and we run them to football or soccer or cheerleading or gymnastics or lessons or something. So our kids are kind of being set up for not being able to, in many cases, figure out what to do with their time. And they're used to that constant structure and constant supervision. I mean, I remember not too long ago being in the store and they have Crayola paper that come with special markers. So if you go off the paper, there's no ink stain on your carpets. And they even have certain markers that you could color. And as you color with the marker, the correct color appears within the lines. So we've even in some ways taken away that opportunity to do art, which is all about experimenting and doing, you know, different things. And so we're kind of setting our kiddos up and ourselves up for that frustration. So I wonder if maybe it helps to think like that a little bit. And if people are listening to us and they have some younger children, maybe building in a day or a weekend morning where our children are a little bit less supervised and directed.
I think they need to be taught that. I think that how everything is going for them, and it's such a different world that we live in right now. When we were younger or had younger children, you almost could not tell your parent you were bored because they'd find something for you to do. And you
Which
would
was
go
always
off.
dishes or pulling the weeds, right? It was not fun.
Yeah, so you made sure you didn't say that
Oh, yeah.
because you knew they'd find something for you to do. And we would spend a lot of time using our imagination and resting and thinking and exploring. Our kids don't now have those same tools in their toolbox to know what to do when they're bored. So I would think that it may be taught, having a quiet day, a bored day, and start teaching them what to do when they are bored. Giving them the opportunity to not have 100% supervision where they're in another room and they're working on something. I know, like, and this is just, I've often thought this, if you gave our generation 10 items, just random items from around the house, you'd probably make something with them. You could figure out what to do, you'd make something. If we gave 10 random items to our kids, they would just look at us like, what is this? What do you want us to do with it? Like, their minds are not working that way. So I think you could make like a book, flashcards, use like popsicle sticks that have ideas on them, and send them to go get something from that, board canister and say, pick one of those and, go do it. But you can't expect them to know how to do those things unless we start teaching them that, and teaching them that downtime. I think that's why, as parents, we have to work so hard at scheduling self-care, because we are so busy and we're not teaching our kids how to be bored, how to do self-care, how to just rest and relax, and that they don't need constant input.
And I wonder too if a lot of it is like,
I really like that,
I
Melissa.
wonder if some of that is too, like Tracy in your situation, maybe your daughter's on Instagram watching everybody supposedly out doing really exciting or fun things right now. And I wonder if that makes you feel like I don't have anything to post because I'm just sitting here in my bedroom staring at my same walls.
Absolutely. The vision of seeing everybody's perfect pictures online and all the things that they're doing gives just a false feeling, right? And something I was going to say to Melissa is, we also have to teach our children kind of how to be okay with not doing something and being in their own skin. I have said it for so long with my daughter, like, you have to, actually both daughters, you have to be okay with being with yourself, and, not being, out doing the things that, Christina just said, being on Instagram and stuff like that, but being okay with just sitting with yourself. That's not boredom. That you have to find out who you are and be okay with that. Do you know what I mean?
I
Well,
wonder
and
though,
I,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead, Jill.
No, and I think, like we were talking about social media, putting that out there, and I have to remind my teenagers that nobody's going to take a picture of them laying on the couch watching TV. Nobody's putting up the picture of them mowing the grass.
Right.
They're putting up these fabulous pictures. So I have to always tell my kids, listen, that's not real life. Like, I could have taken 50 pictures of my son at the beach 2 weeks ago, and we could spread them out and make it look like we spent the whole month of July at the beach, and it's just not realistic. And we live on a farm, so my boys get kicked out of the house all the time. Go play. Yesterday they caught like 7 frogs, and they were building a frog house. And I think it is just, our circumstances. Like, I can do that. I live in the country. Like, I know that nobody's around here. Nobody's going to do it. And I think a lot of parents, though, nowadays, it's easier to give them a game, give them an iPad, shut them up. And don't get me wrong, there are days when I'm like chasing my kids with an iPad. Here, take it. Just please. Like, let me know where you're at. You're safe. But I just think that this generation of kids, you're right. So many people have kind of said, sit down, be calm, be quiet, take this. And then kids aren't supposed to be calm and quiet. My children are not. And so then I think that there we go with expectations again. We're expecting them to just sit. Like, I work from home. We all do. and I have a 6 and an 8-year-old. So like there's times when you see a head bobbing in the back because Tracy, that one day he was patiently waiting to go swimming. I think he had goggles on and we were having a meeting and he was bobbing in the back, patiently waiting for me, and I just think that, I try to give myself grace every day because it's hard. It is so hard nowadays raising kids, and my kids are all so many different ages, and just seeing from one generation to the next, and to just in the 6 kids of mine, like seeing how they act. My big kids could build a tree house and be out there all day long. The middle kids, they would rather be on a headset or do, you know what I mean? And I think that we as parents have to give our kids grace too.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
we talk about.
So Jill, I'm going to send my daughter to you, right? Because you live on a farm and you say to get out of
No,
I'm
please.
sending her to you.
Everybody
Okay.
thinks Miss Jill is so wonderful and fun because I have a farm, and I'm like, go clean a stall, go fly spray my horse, go clean the pool. Like,
Yep.
no. And my kids don't dare say they're bored because we have a whole lot to
Absolutely.
do here.
No doubt.
My dad, when I was growing up, had horses, and you would not dare say you were bored. There were stalls to clean, there were things to do outside on that. They had chickens and peacocks and stuff like that. So
Yep.
you were not bored, and I think I agree. Right now, we give our electronics to our kids and not say, come back when the streetlights come on, go outside.
Well, and you have so many situations nowadays where people are watching you and your children and judging your parenting. And I mean, my mom and dad worked when I was a kid, and I would, maybe if I remembered, leave a note on the table, because you better not be calling mom at work again for the 47th time at 9 a.m. So leave a note on the table. I'm going to Diane's house, and get on my bike and drive to the next town, like a town over, to see my friend. And maybe we would start there. Maybe she wasn't home. Maybe she couldn't come out, and then go someplace else and go someplace else. And they would never be able to track me down if something were to happen. And I grew up in Luzerne County, and we had those coal shale kind of like mountains, and we would climb them, and we would be like walking the railroad trestles, and like, I'm sure things nowadays that if people knew that your children were doing that, CYS would be at your door the next day.
Yes.
So we, for you have it maybe a little easier in some cases, Jill, that you're in the country, but thinking about the families in the suburbs, or certainly families here in the city, where in many, it may not necessarily be safe for your kid to go to the park on their own. Or when we lived in Blossburg, there were no sidewalks for the kids to walk to the park on their own. And then again, you get people who are like looking for a reason to call and cause problems in some cases, so that we have those societal pressures on us. And we know if we are raising a child with a mental health challenge, especially things like ADHD, you are automatically more likely to have someone call CYS on you. And not everybody has that privilege, where when the caseworker comes to their house, you could go, yeah, I was letting my kid have a little bit of freedom. They were perfectly fine. Leave me alone.
Yeah. I think about the fact that when I was little, we lived in town from the time up until I was like 8. And we lived in like the little suburbs. And I used to walk down our hill. We lived in this housing plan. It was this real long hill. I used to walk down it on the main road, Jefferson Avenue in Washington, cross it, and walk about a half mile down the road and go to Isley's and get ice cream and play the arcade games. I was like 6, and my parents both worked, and my brother was supposed to be watching me. He was 12, and I would just go get candy and some ice cream and go play. And then I would walk back down the road and walk back up the hill. And I think now, first of all, I can't even imagine letting my child do that. But I think now, oh my Lord, like so many things could have happened to me. Somebody could have taken me, and now I'm that mom. I am a little bit crazy about stuff like that. But you're right. Somebody would now call CYS in a heartbeat They would have called the state police. They'd have followed me to the store. They would have taken me, and it's a totally different world now. I don't think a kid could do that without something. I don't know. I'm a crazy mom, so I picture the worst. But I just remember doing that stuff. And we used to walk. My brothers played football. I would walk with them to football practice. It was like 2 miles away. We would just walk, and my parents would come after work, and like nobody thought anything weird because other kids were doing it too. You
Yeah,
know.
because how else are you going to get there?
Exactly. Yeah, we would
Yeah.
like, oh my God, if we wouldn't have walked, my brothers would have been late, and they couldn't leave me home alone. So they had to drag their 6-year-old little sister to football practice with them. And we just walked down the main roads, no sidewalks, no nothing. It's the main road through Washington. And we just walked,
Yeah.
and nowadays, well, first of all, nowadays, my kids would never do that. Kids would never walk to football practice. But yeah, and you're right. People would call CYS in a heartbeat now.
Yeah, I think that we are, as a society, are harder on parents instead of maybe a little bit more supportive in terms of maybe calling the parent the next day and saying, hey, I saw your kids walking to football practice. I go to work at 3:00. It's no big deal for me to swing by the house a little bit. I can always go in a little early, pick them up and drop them off at practice. Would that help? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So instead of helping parents out, I think that sometimes people judge.
Oh yeah.
But I will say the one thing that occurred to me, and maybe this is something that is perhaps unique to our kiddos. I was having a conversation with my girls, and I was saying something about not falling asleep with the TV on. And my younger daughter said, I did that so that my mind didn't race. And I wonder if our children who have some mental health challenges, if that downtime, that boredom time is maybe overly difficult because maybe they start to have those racing thoughts and worry about things, and then that anxiety spirals. So I wonder if maybe that could be some of the reason why they need to keep busy. And I wonder if there's ways that we can kind of think of things to keep them busy to help head that off.
I think even acknowledge.
I could not agree with you more, Christina.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa. Absolutely. I've seen that for a long time for my daughter, that the quiet time, she starts to overthink. And then when she overthinks, then she starts to worry. Then that worry becomes panic. So there's a spiraling kind of effect. And so oftentimes I have to have her refocus on her other items, like, okay, we're going to do something else to take your mind off of what you're thinking right now, because right now you're overthinking and it's kind of getting yourself into trouble a little bit, because now you're kind of reacting and going, well, people don't want to spend time with me. I'm like, no, that's not true. I think that they're just at an appointment right now, or something like that. So let's try to refocus our attention onto something different that will give you some energy and maybe a positive thinking. So that is definitely something that is hard to do.
I had an experience with one of my kids that they had gone with some friends to this relaxation salt caves, and the teacher was trying to get them to relax, and it was guided. So it was sit down. They were sitting Indian style and could feel the ground underneath them and the eyes closed, and they were to pretend that they were in a forest and they were going to pick a tree and lean their back against it and feel the bark against their back. And this was like a whole process. My child had so much stress over that. And I asked her, like, well, explain to me what was going on with you. Like, why couldn't you relax? And then she started worrying, like, then everybody knows I can't relax and I'm making others not be able to relax. And she's like, so she's in the forest and she starts like looking for a tree. Well, then was that the right tree? Is, are there bugs in it? And she just went like from A to Z immediately and was dealing with squirrels and all kinds of stuff. And she just could not settle herself. And like her trying to do an exercise like that, she would have been much easier to fold a load of laundry and just keep her hands and mind busy and not even try that process. And I think it, like, for her, it was eye-opening to realize she couldn't just be quiet and calm, that she needs that background noise, like to, your kid's sitting there doing their homework and they got the radio blasted and you're like, turn that off. You need to concentrate. And they're like, I need this background noise in order for me to concentrate. So I think trying to get into their minds and seeing things through their eyes and asking them, talk to them about those things. We use the words like anxiety, get them to explain to you what that looks like to them, how that process is. And sometimes they can't really explain it. Maybe they're too young to try to explain it. That Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, they have what is called the Mood Crew, and it is the cutest thing. They have all these different emotions and feelings, and they give them little cartoon characters. And you can start out by trying to teach your young ones to even point at that emotion. Like, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. But I think giving them the opportunity to share what that's like, instead of turn it down, why do you do that? Does that help?
It's funny that you bring that up because my son, who is 17 and, claims he, doesn't have any challenges or diagnosis. When he was little, he had severe separation anxiety, whole family situation. We don't have enough time in a podcast for it, but severe separation anxiety. And still to this day, like, he's my very clingy kid. And we just kind of joke about it that he's, mama's boy. Within the last year, he always falls asleep with the TV on. So you could go 2 or 3 in the morning and this TV's on. And I'm always like, you need to turn it off. Well, he finally told me about a year ago. He said, Mom, I can't. When it's quiet in my room, my mind races. And I think that scares him because 2 of my other children are diagnosed with ADHD. So you hear all that horrible stuff about that. So and Riker's always taught, my 8-year-old knows very much about his diagnosis. So he's always talking about his mind racing. So I think Logan was didn't want to be grouped in with that. So he told me, he said, Mom, I can't. I start to think about things and I think too much into things. He said, and then you start to panic, just like you said, Tracy. So I had to buy him a sound machine. And, so and that's what he says. Is it weird, Mommy? I'm 17. I have a sound. I said, no, it's not weird. I have to have it pitch black and quiet for me to kind of finally get my downtime. But Melissa, I would be looking for the squirrels and the bugs too. So I'm with your child there. But yeah, so Logan, and then when we went on vacation, we did not take his sound machine. And he would be coming in my bedroom at like 3:00 at night because there wasn't a TV or anything in his room. And he kept coming in and talking to me. So literally by the 3rd day, I went to the store and bought a sound machine. What I feel bad about, the worst thing and I don't care that he needs a sound machine, whatever he needs. But what I feel bad is he did not want to admit it because he felt he was going to be grouped into this whole, I have a diagnosis. I have, you know what I mean? And it is what it is. Like, I hate to say it. Back when we were all young, they didn't diagnose us. But if they had a chance to go, if they had a chance, every single one of us would have a diagnosis. I'm sure we all do. And we probably know about it by now. Now it's just kind of like my midlife thing. But, and kids just don't want to be diagnosed now because there's this whole thing about it. And like, everybody makes a big deal that my son's ADHD. People literally talk about it. Like, it is what it is. And Logan just did not want that to be attached to him. So,
I do think that our kiddos do get like that. They see they're in groups and they hear what people say. They hear what their peers say. They hear what adults say. They hear how people talk poorly about people with any kind of diagnosis, or the wrong shoes, or the wrong haircut, or living in the wrong place, right? So they're, I think, overly worried about that, as they probably should be, or not should be, but as is probably normal, because they've been in those conversations, which is why it's always really good if we're in situations like that where people are using language or making comments that are less than flattering, to kind of challenge them a little bit on, like, yeah, do you really think that? But I was thinking, Melissa, when you were talking, like, why is it always sit and do something quiet? Like, why does it have to be that? Why can't it be? And especially when you're a kiddo, probably almost anybody, where we're expected to sit still all day, and we know there's that flight, fight, or freeze, and definitely in like fight and flight, there's that adrenaline. And so maybe it's good for us to go on a walk, to concentrate, go on a walk to relax, instead of sitting still and visualizing places. And why is it always the woods? Yuck.
I'm sitting here
That's not where I want to be.
and I'm
That's not
like,
where I want to
okay,
be.
now I'm thinking about poison ivy and snakes. So
Mhm.
now my mind's going 100 miles. I wasn't even there. Now I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not sitting down in the woods. Like, you don't know what.
And where I used to work, we had one of our staff members. It was a crisis center, and we had a staff member who used to do like meditations and stuff with the staff, which was great because they had a lot of secondary trauma, and they had a very stressful job. And if that's what worked for them, that was great. And our one staff member had done a guided meditation for our advocates, and then got done. And she was like, I was there, and our accountant was there, and she's like, do you want me to do one for you ladies? And we're like, all right, I don't think that this is kind of my thing, but we're both going to give it a try. And so we both, here I am, and my accountant is this like powerhouse woman who has, all these businesses that she's running and stuff. And here we're both, sitting there, our eyes closed, walking through the woods, relaxing our body, whatever. And we got done, and the staff member laughed. We're like, thank you. That was nice of you to offer to do that. And she left, and we're like, no, I cannot sit still for that long, because my mind started racing. I have to do this before I go home, and I got to get that done. And like, for me, that was not relaxing. Maybe we should talk to our kiddos about doing other things besides, and definitely not in the woods.
No.
Like, maybe I can be like, imagine yourself pushing your shopping cart through Target. And you walk down the clearance aisle, and a beautiful duvet in your new bedroom color is on sale for half price. Right? Like, all right,
yeah.
now I'm feeling a little relaxed. That's good.
Sometimes, like when I'm having trouble, like if I'm having trouble sleeping, I'll literally like rearrange my house in my mind. Like I'll just start thinking, go room by room, and like I could move this here and move that there. Not like what typically you would think you should be thinking about before you go to bed, but like that nonsense of thinking about something like that you don't have to do. Like you don't have to get up the next day and rearrange everything, but just like thinking about something that has no pressure, no stress, nothing like that. But I think giving our kids the opportunity to figure out about themselves. And I think like kids like your son, Jill, they probably recognize that there's something going on, but then they see somebody else maybe at school, and they think, well, I'm not that bad. And just to think of ADHD in its own, there's so many degrees of that someone may have more of this or less of that. And it may be hard for them to align themselves and see that like I'm having the same issue they're having, because maybe what I have isn't as bad, and so I don't think I really have it. So I think it's, really hard on our kids. And you think as parents, you know how much guilt we put on ourselves and expectations? I think our kids do too. And I think like as much as like getting older has been just a great joy. I would never want to be a teenager again in this world. I could not do it. The amount of pressure that is put on them, society, and what they do to themselves, I can't even imagine that.
I feel you on that one. I know there's another podcast coming up about athletes, student athletes, that and the pressure that I look forward to that one. I'll probably cry during it, but that's my son. He has all the pressure in the world on him because he is a student athlete and he's kind of like that guy. And I think that that's why he does not want to get lumped in with the diagnosis, because I think he thinks that is going to take away from what everybody thinks of him, whether it be, friends or, school or sports wise. And they just don't want to be. And I don't think it's horrible, like to have a diagnosis. You know what? Like my son who's ADHD is the most fabulous human I've ever met. I mean, there are days where he exhausts me. I'm not going to lie, but he is fabulous in every single way. The way he thinks, the way he is. And it's not because he has ADHD. It's because it's him. And I think that's the one big thing. Everybody wants to lump them together, and these kids, they aren't. They're not lumped together just because he has ADHD. My other son, he's bipolar. He's not lumped in with a group of people. Like everybody's different. Everybody handles it differently. Everybody handles himself differently. And I think Logan's biggest fear is just people thinking like that of him. And that goes back to that pressure. That everybody's always put on him his whole life to be perfect, to be this, to be that. And he's afraid if he's not what everybody thinks of him, then he's failed. And like you said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be him. I honestly couldn't.
Having 4 kids, I took the opportunity and spoke to each of them at different ages when they were each like 11, 12 years old. To have the conversation with them, to explain to them that I didn't think they were perfect. I didn't expect them to be perfect. I expected them to be human, just like me or anybody else, and we're going to make mistakes. And I really tried to hit this before we got to teenagers, because I knew how hard it is to be a teenager and you're trying to be perfect and sometimes think you are. My biggest fear in having that conversation, I was afraid they would make a mistake and be so afraid to tell me that they made this little mistake that was a human mistake, that they would find themselves in more trouble by not coming to me and sharing with me what was going on. Out of 4 kids, I only had one that was totally shocked that I did not think he was perfect. He absolutely thought that he was perfect and that I thought he was perfect. I'm like, no, you're just like everybody else. You're like me. You're like your siblings. You're like your dad. And he was just floored that I didn't think he was perfect.
Was he like appalled that you would?
Yes.
Was he like really insulted? Like,
yes.
What do you mean?
And he came in 4th in the state for rifle, and then went to states. He really had this very high self-esteem, and you do want them to have high self-esteem, but you don't want it to be at a cost that they're holding this up and can never waver from it. Like they have to keep this forever, be at this standing. But and I busted out laughing because I just wasn't expecting that reaction. I think it was important for him to know that, I didn't think he was perfect. And, you're out there driving or whatnot, you make a mistake, just call me, just whatever it is, we can work it out. You're never going to do something so bad that I'm not going to be your person, But I think it's just really hard on these kids, the amount of pressure they put on themselves and it's put on them, even just keeping up with social media, like taking that picture. If you told 100 kids, teenagers, to go out there and take a picture of themselves while they're just not had a shower, they're eating a bowl of cereal, laying across the couch, they would be like appalled that you would expect them to post that.